plausible myth of our age is the myth of the fully automatic model of the universe, in which man is a fluke, and which he doesn't really belong, he's a chance operation, and when you're dead, and that's all there is to it. And that's so plausible that really almost everyone believes in it. Without realizing that it is made out of whole cloth. It's nothing but a myth. It's a way of looking at things, a way of striking an attitude. The assumptions of psychoanalysis and of a good deal of psychotherapy in various types and schools do not include the insight that you are basically the works. Historically speaking, psychotherapy originated in the 19th century and therefore still carries on the 19th century assumptions about the nature of the universe. And all those 19th century assumptions about the universe were a put-down. They included the myth, you see, that the universe is actually blind energy. It is essentially stupid. And man's intelligence and man's values and man's consciousness are a fluke in the world. Man, in other words, is not a symptom of the world, like an apple is a symptom of an apple tree. But man is a fluke, a kind of a joke, a chance. And that to be realistic and hard-headed and factual, in other words, a strong man, you must realize that you are caught in this trap and face the facts. This 19th century philosophy of man's place in the world and his identity has become the most plausible common sense.
We confuse happiness with status, and we confuse ourselves as living organisms which are one with this whole universe with something we call our personality. Now, what is our personality? Our personality is what we call our image of ourselves, and also our thought about ourselves, our idea of ourselves. This is the person. In other words, what people meet and understand, and what I understand as Alan Watts, is a big act which is not really me. Because in the image of Alan Watts, there are not all my unconscious processes, both psychological and physical. The construction of my brain is not contained in the concept Alan Watts, and the concept Alan Watts does not contain the inseparable relationships which I have with all the rest of the universe. And therefore that concept is a fraud. And when it's mistaken for the real me, there's a confusion.
The mind shapes reality based on the information it has attained through experience. Depending on what information you've attained, you will have a specified view on reality based on what you know and what you don't know. And there's a lot we don't know. So I will start this off by saying that I know enough to know that I know nothing. Each human being is part of a cultural paradigm. These paradigms mold the mind to view reality through a specific frame of reference. Depending on the cultural paradigm, the society will develop in accordance to the belief systems established by the general consensus. In the case for Western civilization, we view the universe and all life within it as an accident, a mechanized system of randomness, emergence of order out of chaos. We also view ourselves as the dominant species over all life. As a result, we manifested a linear economy that operates irrespective to the natural order of this planet.
An economic system that is so sane that the more successful it is in its own terms, the quicker it destroys the planet. It's the perfect environmental and human assassin. It insists every year that we take more from the earth even quicker, turn it into even more things, sell even more things, consume even more things, throw away even more things, to worship the real God of the modern world, economic growth.
The actions of all humans around the world are the manifestations of the cultural paradigm that shapes each society, resulting in the world that we see today. If each person in the world at some point in their life experienced a moment of self-actualization, a window of opportunity can open up for a paradigm shift. And when I say self-actualization, I mean realizing the true nature of reality, who and what we are. Relative to the rest of the Earth's history, humanity has only begun discovering what we are. We look outwards to space, the macrocosm, and we look inwards into the microcosm. No matter what plane of existence you are looking at the same universe. The universe is everything, and we are it. Not only a part of it, but it itself. By virtue of the fact that we are made of the elements of the universe, atoms and quarks and so on. These things, which we only have just begun to understand, are held together by the forces of nature. Electromagnetism, gravity, and the strong and weak forces. That is to say that as a species, we have only just begun to open our eyes to the world around us. So, with that in mind, I'd like to present to you a new theory about the universe, a theory that can only be understood by those who take the time to understand the pieces of information that make sense of the claim. And the claim is that the universe is a fractal, multidimensional living organism. We are the universe experiencing itself, and consciousness is a fundamental aspect of the universe. The universe is not just a chaotic accident. Fractal geometry reveals the order that is hidden in plain sight. The argument made here is that the emergence of order is not a random occurrence. It is a sign of intelligence, as implied by the mathematical sequences found throughout all life forms and the formations in the universe. Throughout nature, we find the same fractal patterns and mathematical sequences involved with the formation of biological, chemical, and physical processes. As if all form must follow these mathematical principles. The Fibonacci sequence is one of the more famous recurring iterations found throughout nature. These mathematical sequences can also be found in the unseen.
The whole of the fractal looks just like a part, which looks just like the next smaller part. The similarity of the pattern just keeps on going. You see self-similarity in everything. Fractals are in our lungs, kidneys, and blood vessels.
Flowers, plants, weather systems, the rhythms of the heart, the very essences of life.
Fractal geometry is what gave rise to the holographic universe theory, due to the fact that self-similarity is found everywhere in the universe, and in the structure of the universe itself, from the microcosm to the macrocosm. The emblem of fractal geometry, known as the Mandelbrot set, reveals the infinite nature of reality. Its conception the result of mathematical sequences typed into a computer, plotted onto a graph. No matter where you zoom into this set, you will never find a finite end. the more you continue to zoom into it, the more you'll realize that you're traveling in an infinite loop, revealing the paradox that is reality itself. This shape contains within it information about the universe, information about ourselves. You could run a computer for thousands of years and never come to an end to this fractal universe. We find the same Fibonacci sequences within this mathematical matrix, along with many other sequences that all apply to the formation of the universe and all within the universe. For those who take psychedelics, you'll find these patterns to be familiar, but we'll get to that later on. For now, let's make sense of the information that will lead up to that point. Fractal geometry equips us with the right lens to view reality. In this way, we can make sense of concepts such as the parallel universe and multidimensional realities. Given the fact that these same fractal sequences are found throughout nature, nature being synonymous with the universe, and at all scales of existence, it would seem that it's describing the nature of reality itself. The principles of self-similarity, however, do not manifest as literally as the Mandelbrot set. They instead manifest different variations of the same formation while still following the principle of self-similarity. For example, cells are made up of billions if not trillions of atoms, whereas the superstructure of the universe is made up of billions if not trillions of galaxies, and each galaxy is made up of billions of stars. All the while, at every scale, we find the same structures being formed, raising the question, just what exactly is this universe? When applying fractal geometry to our thinking, the possibility opens up for a living universe rather than a mechanistic universe, meaning that on a fractal scale, we are the universe and the universe is an intelligent living being by virtue of the fact that we are intelligent.
Let's suppose now that we'll follow the theory of those astronomers who maintain that the universe is not a steady state thing, but there was an enormous bang. Billions of years ago, and from this bang all the galaxies were thrown out into space. Then you look back at this as something which happened in the past and which is, as it were, the cause of the present. But what I would say is that bang is still going on. When you take a lovely bottle of black ink and throw it as hard as you can at a white wall and smash it, all it goes swoosh like this, you know. And in the center it's dense, but on the out fringes it has all kinds of interesting curlicues. And that's all, you see, one splash. Now in the same way, we are at the moment sitting in this room and talking and thinking, we are all the little curlicues out on the end of the original cosmic bang. We are it. We are not effects of it. Because to think that you are separate from the Big Bang is simply a matter of definition. It's a way of talking. We separate events from each other in order to measure them. That is to say, the notion that there are distinct things and distinct events in the physical world is a calculus. It is like pretending that a curve is a series of points.
In order to make sense of the concepts presented, one must view the world from all fields of science, not just one individual field or two. All is required because in reality, life is not compartmentalized. All processes are interconnected as one process. The Virgo Consortium is an international group of scientists carrying out supercomputer simulations of the formation of galaxies, galaxy clusters, large-scale structures of the universe, and the evolution of the intergalactic medium. This is an image showcasing the latest simulation of the known universe. The bright yellow represents large clusters of galaxies surrounded by trillions of stars, while the purple web represents the dark matter and dark energy. For those who take neuroscience, you will instantly recognize that the universe looks shockingly similar to the neurological structure of the brain. The implications of this image are profound in that, from the perspective of fractal geometry, the galaxies assume the role of the neurotransmitter traveling through the branches or filaments of the neurons. The dark matter is a representation of the superstructure of the universe. The galaxies move about accordingly within the synaptic pathways. Just reconsider all the established facts about the universe and see the implications behind these facts. Everything in this universe, the planets, the stars, us, is made up of subatomic particles. If we were to follow the journey of any one of the subatomic particles that make up this planet, that make up our bodies, we will find that they trace back to a supernova, the death of a previous star. At the end of a star's life, it explodes into a supernova, spreading its enriched contents throughout space. The forces of the universe then mold these particles into new stars and planets. These same particles that now make up the body of a planet, in our case the Earth, now go through processes that take billions of years, which lead to the formation of the foundations for all life. DNA. The building blocks of life as we know it. Genetic information accumulated over millions of years leads to the formation of all organisms. But how was DNA initially formed? Mainstream biologists favor the molecular soup model, which suggests that molecules were simply bumping into one another at random for billions of years, eventually accidentally leading to the formation of DNA. However, consider this possibility. In the words of Fred Hoyle, the chances of higher life forms that might have emerged in a molecular soup is comparable to the chance of a tornado sweeping through a junkyard and assembling a fully functional jumbo jet. Meaning, DNA is far too complex to simply gloss over as some accident. It is plausible to suggest that whatever initially formed DNA may very well be another force of the universe that we have yet to understand, much like the forces that form the galaxies and solar systems: gravity, electromagnetic fields, strong and weak forces, dark matter, and so on. We can all agree that DNA was formed somehow. From there, over 1 billion years of evolution leads to all the different forms of life on the planet, the Earth genetic family tree. The process of development that I just outlined, the supernova leading to the formation of DNA, traces back to the singularity before the Big Bang. Each star is an offspring of a previous star, and according to known physics, everything in the universe was once one, a singularity that became all that is. If scientists were to consider the implications of fractal geometry, they'd begin understanding that the universe has no beginning or end. It is an infinite field of, well, there is no right word to describe it. I could say energy, but that isn't accurate. I could say consciousness, but that still isn't accurate. And I could say space-time, but that still isn't accurate. We haven't developed the language to describe the deeper meaning of reality. So the best that I can say with the language that I'm using is to say that the universe is a fractal living organism existing within a greater universe, multidimensionally. And we are it. I want to emphasize that. We are not separate from it. The illusion of physical separation dissolves when we dive into the quantum level of existence, the inner dimension.
Let's imagine that we are perfectly flat. I mean, absolutely flat. Everybody in Flatland is, of course, exceptionally flat. We have squares, circles, triangles, and we all scurry about, and we can go into our houses and do our flat business. We have width and length, but no height at all. We know, us Flatlanders, about left, right, and we know about forward, back, but we have never heard of up-down. Let us imagine that into Flatland, hovering above it, comes a strange three-dimensional creature which, oddly enough, looks like an apple. And the three-dimensional creature sees an attractive, congenial-looking square, watches it enter its house, and decides in a gesture of interdimensional amity to say hello. Hello, says the three-dimensional creature. How are you? I am a visitor from the third dimension. Well, the poor square looks around his closed house, sees no one there, and what's more, has witnessed a greeting coming from his insides, a voice from within. He surely is getting a little worried about his sanity. The three-dimensional creature is unhappy about being considered a psychological aberration, and so he descends to actually enter in Flatland only partially, only a plane, a cross-section through him can be seen. So when the three-dimensional creature first reaches Flatland, it's only the points of contact which can be seen, and we'll represent that by stamping the apple in this ink pad and placing that image in Flatland. And as the apple were to descend through, slither by Flatland, we would progressively see higher and higher slices, which we can represent by cutting the apple. So the square, as time goes on, sees a set of objects mysteriously appear from nowhere and inside a closed room and change their shape dramatically.
This would be completely freaky to a two-dimensional being. But it makes complete sense if you live in 3 dimensions and you pass a sphere through my universe.
His only conclusion could be that he's gone bonkers. Well, the apple might be a little annoyed at this conclusion, and so, not such a friendly gesture from dimension to dimension, makes a contact with the square from below and sends our flat creature fluttering and spinning above Flatland. At first, the square has no idea what's happening. He's terribly confused. This is utterly outside his experience. But after a while, he comes to realize that he is seeing inside closed rooms in Flatland. He is looking inside his fellow flat creatures. He is seeing Flatland from a perspective no one has ever seen it before to his knowledge. Getting into another dimension provides as an incidental benefit a kind of X-ray vision. Now our flat creature slowly descends to the surface, and his friends rush up to see him. From their point of view, he has mysteriously appeared from nowhere. He hasn't walked from somewhere else. He's come from some other place. They say, for heaven's sake, what's happened to you? And the poor square has to say, well, I was in some other mystic dimension called up. And they will pat him on his side and comfort him, or else they'll ask, well, show us, where is that third dimension? Point to it. And the poor square will be unable to comply.
Our reality is more than what it appears to be. The math allows for a multidimensional universe, but our minds cannot conceptualize a 4D reality, let alone the rest. This is because of the fact that our biology is programmed to be in tune with this 3D reality.
But maybe more interesting is the other direction in dimensionality. What about the fourth dimension?
There are things that happen in quantum physics that kind of defy our sensibilities. Like particles pop in and out of existence. They defy any rational attempt to understand it. Particles can be entangled with one another. A particle can be here, and there's a barrier, and it can spontaneously show up on the other side of the barrier at faster than the speed of light. All of this is just mysterious. Who is to say that some of the mysterious things we are describing accurately, but don't otherwise make sense in a higher dimension? And these are just the manifestations of higher dimensional phenomena in our world.
The brain filters out a vast amount of information in order for you to focus on the present moment and surroundings. We are inhabiting an infinite nexus that we call reality. Everything is made up of something else. Everything is relative to one another. Everything is interconnected.
A line is one-dimensional, but it's bounded by two zero-dimensional things. Those are the points. One dimension bounded by two zero-dimensional points. A square is 2 dimensions bounded by 4 one-dimensional sides. A cube is 3 dimensions bounded by 6 two-dimensional sides. 2 points, 4 sides of a square, 6 sides of a cube. A 4-dimensional cube has 8 sides, and each of those sides is a 3-dimensional cube, 1 dimension down from itself. In the same way, each side of a 3-dimensional cube is a 2-dimensional square. So when you get to 4 dimensions, the sides are 3-dimensional surfaces. And you can take this all the way up. And our brains can't picture what we call a hypercube, in some circles a tesseract. We can't picture a volume bounded by 3-dimensional cubes. What does it even mean?
This is the nature of the fractal universe. Each dimension cannot exist without the precursor dimensions. 4D cannot exist without 3D, 3D cannot exist without 2D. Much like how higher numerical values cannot exist without the previous numbers accumulating before them. So from this point of view, reality is woven together like a work of art. This has inspired the creation of a variety of systems of knowledge, such as sacred geometry. The Metatron cube is one such shape that represents the multidimensional nature of reality. For the shape that makes up the cube can only exist when the line is drawn from the center of each circle connecting all of them. The structure's complexity increases with the connection of each additional circle. When the pattern is complete, the shape takes form. The universe can only exist when specific properties are established. Each circle here is an analogy of these properties. These forces are interdependent on one another, and as we begin to understand more about the nature of reality, more as of yet unseen forces will be discovered, giving rise to new theories that will shake up the established paradigm. One such notion considers the possibility that the universe is a multidimensional intelligent field, supporting the notion of a living universe. The dark matter fractal field is a new theory that unifies fractal geometry and dark matter, explaining the multidimensional universe in a non-mechanistic way. Only 3% of the universe is normal matter, baryonic matter. The rest of the universe is comprised of something else unknown. We call it dark matter and dark energy. This stuff makes up the microcosm as well as the macrocosm. As Timothy Fulton Johns puts it, there is always more than meets the eye in a fractal frame of reference. Almost 3/4 of our globe is home to another world that we are only beginning to understand. Yet, what has been very obvious from the earliest investigation of the sea is that it reveals a complex reality alien to us. The sea is a world in and of itself. Though it provides the very fabric of existence of the life it sustains, the combined network of oceans that blankets our planet go unnoticed by its inhabitants, due to its scale and the fact that these waters are the very space, i.e. fluid, these forms live in and navigate through moment to moment. As it is with the sea life, so it is in our world. We, like our marine counterparts, fail to notice the sea of our own reality. The space we occupy and live in is empty to our everyday sensory perceptions, until, of course, we feel the wind on our face. Only then do we become aware that something unseen actually exists. The 5 senses we possess are incapable of detecting the extremes of both the microscopic and the cosmic scales, yet they do exist. The theory claims that in addition to the known forces of the universe, there are forces that shape matter into form, self-organizing fields that are intimately involved with the formation of the universe and the formation of life itself. These forces can be characterized as higher dimensional due to the fact that they elude our means of observing them. Weighing and measuring dark matter, for example, is only possible by observing the causalities happening around it. Think of it as observing a black hole. The black hole itself cannot be seen. We can only see the distortion of the light around it. It may very well be that dark matter is higher dimensional, and that its interaction with baryonic matter, the result of interdimensional causalities. The brain is programmed to navigate through the third dimension. It cannot comprehend higher dimensions, much like how the two-dimensional beings cannot comprehend the three-dimensional beings. It can only exist within a point of observation corresponding to the observer. So the idea here is that the physical universe is only made possible by the causalities within higher dimensions, meaning that all dimensions are built upon each other, giving rise to what we are experiencing, reality. Like a repetitious fractal pattern, the emergence of the fundamental forces happens as a direct effect of the interdimensional interactions that shape each iteration of reality. While many pontificate that the universe is a simulation, adhering to the mechanistic model, the universe may as likely be a dream within a dream, so to speak, a nexus of consciousness that manifests into all things possible.
If you want to see fear in a quantum physicist's eyes, just mention the words, the measurement problem. The measurement problem is this: an atom only appears in a particular place if you measure it. In other words, an atom is spread out all over the place until a conscious observer decides to look at it. So the act of measurement or observation creates the entire universe.
Could it be that consciousness is a fundamental force of the universe and not just an accident of brain chemistry? Just to be clear, the definition of conscious life relies solely on the cultural values of a society. The Hopi, for instance, see the earth as the mother of all life, and that all things are made from spirit. In other words, they view all of existence as a living, conscious being. Our societies operate on a belief system that stems from the old Christian model, whether the scientists are willing to admit it or not. The belief system that we all adhere to is that we are above all forms of life, the notion that human beings are the apex of evolution, evident by the way our societies view animals, plants, and the earth itself, resources for us to use, and that consciousness is an epiphenomenon of the brain, meaning consciousness is an accident, that we are all essentially machines. From our society's perspective, all animals and plants are simply machines, as well as the cells and subatomic particles that make up everything. The universe is seen as a machine, and all properties of the universe are described in mechanistic terms. So you see, our perception of reality will determine what, in our minds, is true or false. Do we know what consciousness is? Not for certain, not yet anyway. It is in fact one of the deepest mysteries of science. Many assume that consciousness is generated by the brain itself. This assumption is taken for granted as common sense. However, closer examination reveals the possibility of an equally valid theory. Let's recap the neuroscience and psychology that has been revealed about the brain and its role in our consciousness. Memory is elusive. From what we understand about memory so far, is that it is not held in any single part of the brain. Memory as we know it is the compilation of neurons wired to the senses, meaning that when we recall something, we are stimulating the senses related to the incident, the sounds, the smell, the visuals, the feeling, and the taste. A compilation of actions and reactions of electrochemical stimuli within the brain, retailing the physical sensations of the experience, but not retailing the situation itself. Epigenetic of both environmental stimulus and inheritance of genes to construct a sense of self and a sense of community within the environment. Simply put, your personality is the culmination of all universal and inheritable influences, shaped through every interaction and reaction throughout life. Alas, with the last 2 points in mind, it would seem that the brain is clearly the generator of consciousness, and that we are nothing more than the accidental processes of machine-like cells who they themselves are accidents of a primordial molecular soup. At least, that's what the material reductionists say. The material reductionists who say that the brain generates the illusion of consciousness, and that when it dies, the consciousness ceases to be. Yet despite this, the same evidence used to support this paradigm of thought can be used to support a different theory altogether, that the brain is a transceiver of consciousness. From this perspective, the brain receives the consciousness and filters it through the hardware and software programming of the brain, projecting a sense of identity and self, a sense of I. In other words, the same biochemical and neurological functions can be attributed to the brain receiving the signal that is consciousness, and transmitting it through the psychological filter that is the personality.
The only realities we know are the ones our brain manufactures. Our brain receives millions of signals every minute, and we organize them into holograms which we project outside ourselves and call reality. Out of millions and millions of blobs of energy and light, photons and electrons, they make up this imaginary three-dimensional solid world, which doesn't exist at all according to relativity or quantum mechanics.
Keep in mind that the universe is multidimensional, which means that whatever consciousness is also multidimensional. We mustn't compartmentalize life, separating quantum mechanics from biology. Remember, all fields of science must converge in order to understand the nature of reality, for reality is one constant flow of happenings and possibilities. Simplified, morphic resonance states that morphic fields shape and form